Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. We got a busy man on with us today. David Ubben. He just sold his house, but he's also been writing a billion different stories, all of which, like every story you've written in the past week, David, I wanted to do an entire show about. So I apologize because we're squeezing a lot of this into one spot, but we've got your story on the horror stories from coaches in-home visits while they're recruiting. We've got your Arkansas wayward program story, which has some crazy stuff from Frank Broyles that he said on the radio that just sort of got lost to the sands of time. That there's so many
pre-aggregation
yes,
is a big part of it.
Yes, so many alternate histories of different leagues that you could write with all this. And then you've got a piece out Wednesday on The Athletic on the SEC shorts folks, who are some of the funniest people in America. We will play you a clip of my favorite SEC shorts, but if you haven't been to their YouTube page, you don't have to be an SEC fan to enjoy them. In fact, you may enjoy them more just giving you the opportunity to laugh at all the SEC fans. So it is spectacular. But you've been on a heater, as they say. If you were playing an NBA Jam, you would be on fire.
By the way, I must say, I played a lot of NBA Jam actually in high school and college. A hack for all you folks out there: if you goaltend and get your teammate on fire, you can have endless fire. If you score when you're not on fire and then you're still allowed to goaltend, and you can just beat people by like 50 points.
Wow. That is amazing.
You're welcome, everyone.
That's like Tom Chambers in Lakers versus Celtics in the NBA playoffs. That was the first one of those games. And they messed up when they programmed Tom Chambers' signature move because they gave him a double pump dunk, which he could do from any position inside the 3-point line from a standstill. And they didn't put a sound on it because all the other signature moves had a sound, which meant the sound was either the rim being pulled down and you dunk, or the ball bouncing away because you bricked it. And there was no sound on the Chambers one, so he always made it. It was amazing. So
endless fire is an amazing NBA Jam hack. And I was a big Kemp Schrempf guy. Parks and Recreation star Detlef Schrempf and infamous
Kemp,
I would argue that Sean Kemp, the Rain Man, one of the most him and Dominique Wilkins, I feel like their dunks have been lost to time.
Yes.
In that folks, over 30 might respect them, but I feel like the young NBA folks do not respect Dominique Wilkins or Sean Kemp as much as they should. Go watch your NBA Superstars VHS tapes, guys, because I had all of them, and I think I've seen them 150 times each.
Dominique and Sean were what we call 2-foot leapers. If you watch the early dunk contest, they would differentiate between the 1-foot leapers and the 2-foot leapers pretty frequently. And Dominique was the prime example of the 2-foot leaper. And it looked like he was mad at the basket.
Kemp, one of the most powerful dunkers. I would argue, maybe other than Shaq, maybe as hard of a dunker as the NBA has seen.
Right, and Shaq was 330 pounds. Sean Kemp, now I know he put on weight later.
He was probably 330 at the end of his career, but yeah, in his peak he was probably 200, maybe 210.
Yeah,
he was ripped, man.
Yeah. So
young Kemp. Anyway, this is not an NBA podcast, Andy.
Especially not a
90s NBA podcast.
Let's actually start around, not necessarily, a little bit before NBA Jam debuted. Yes. Let's start. I want to start with Arkansas because you and I had this episode last year where you said, you wrote a column saying, Arkansas's issues are that it's probably in the wrong league. It's cast the wrong way. It doesn't have natural rivals. Now, this was before Texas decided to join the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
But you went back and we're doing a story on kind of where Arkansas got off track and talked to our friend Bo Mattingly. And Bo was a sports talk host in Arkansas. Now he makes documentary films about college football. But what did Bo tell you?
I think I wanted to talk to people who have had their, as I like to say, nose pressed up against the glass for decades. And Bo obviously qualifies there. I talked to Clay Henry as well, the great Orville Henry's son. But Bo sort of talked about, some of the same things that he remembered talking to Frank Broyles about. I mean, gosh, this was 15 years ago. This is a very different age where people could just say some wild stuff on the radio, and if you weren't tuned in, you'd never hear it. And so I lived in Arkansas for 15 something years. I grew up there. I'd never heard this before. At the time he said this, I would have been in college, so I wouldn't have probably had an opportunity to listen to it. But I've never heard people talk about this stuff, and to be able to include it in the story was extremely valuable. So props to Bo for passing that along, because I know Arkansas football. I pay attention to this. I'm fascinated by realignment. I'm fascinated by Arkansas's position in the world. I did not know most of the stuff in this, and I'm figuring if I don't know this, I'm betting most people don't. And I think based on the reaction to the story, my instincts were correct.
Well, I had talked to Frank Broyles for a realignment story. This is back when I worked for the Tampa Tribune. And so this would have been early 2000s. So this would have been a little bit before these clips that we got from Bo. But he had told me a little bit about going in secret to meet with some folks from the SEC, but he didn't get this far into it. Like, all right, here's Frank Broyles about Arkansas and the Big 12, because, the assumption is Arkansas moving to the SEC precipitated the breakup of the Southwest Conference. Well, it sounds like it was breaking up anyway, and Arkansas was looking for a lifeboat. So here's Frank Broyles with Bo Mattingly years and years ago about that.
We wouldn't be in the Big 12. I've been told emphatically by the leaders of the old Southwest Conference and the Big 8 before it was being the Big 12. Well, we would not have been invited to be in the Big 12. We would not have been invited to be a member of the Big 12 had we waited. We would have been an independent in the USA Conference or something like that, because we would not have a chance to be in that conference. I've been told that over and over again by the leaders of both of those conferences.
How about that?
That's wild, right?
By the way, Andy, we in the South needs some more Foghorn Leghorns. I miss just the old Frank guy Broyles inflection. It's incredible.
Classic. Well, and that's why Frank Broyles was a color commentator on football games while he was Arkansas's AD.
What a time. People would be losing their minds about that.
Yeah, shortly after he finished coaching, he was on games, big games. Like, I think it was ABC.
He was working the ABC primetime games, I believe. This is before my day, but it was him and Keith Jackson, wasn't it? At one point,
I believe so. Yeah. That's a couple accents right there.
Yeah, for real.
But that's an emphatic Frank Broyles, and I think you and I got into this last year when we talked about the passion of the Arkansas fans. If you haven't been there, if you haven't been around them, you may not understand just how deep this goes. That these guys, we talk about Tennessee fans a lot, and you live in Knoxville now, so you understand where they're coming. But I don't think Arkansas fans are that different. I think they're just as crazy about their school as Tennessee fans are about theirs.
Well, I talked to Houston Nutt about this, and he mentioned that one of the things that Coach Broyles always used to tell him is when he got to Arkansas, he was always really impressed that everywhere you go, the barbershop, the diner, wherever you're going, you're going to see Arkansas signs up in just because that's what they care about. It is an obsession. Everyone in the state cares about the Hogs, watches the Hogs. It doesn't matter if you're a sports fan or not. When the Hogs have a big moment, everybody's paying attention. And that is just something cultural that grips a state that just does not exist in a lot of other places, in part because there's no pro sports, but in part that name across the chest means something. Like, you are representing the entire state, and people feel that, and people's identity is tied up in that. And I think you see that, in a place like Tennessee, where there's only really one dominant program, in a place like Arkansas, where there's only really one dominant major program. And those places, there's not a Mississippi State. There's not an Auburn where there's split loyalties. It's everyone pulling in the same direction. Sometimes people not involved, the fans anyway. But that is very unique, and I think in a lot of ways unique to the South, in a place that there is one program in a variety of sports that everyone cares about, from the diehards to the culturals to the casuals. And when they play a big game, it's literally all anyone's talking about in church the next morning. That is it. What do you think of that game yesterday?
And interesting to hear Frank Broyles say that, because I think it's always been assumed that Arkansas had a choice, that they could have moved on with the other members of the Southwest Conference, the ones that were going to the Big 12, which I'm actually a little surprised that the Big 8 and the Big 12 wouldn't want, but I don't know. It's the Big 8 piece of it's interesting too, because like Arkansas should be a rival of Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, just based on geography. Like they should play non-conference games all the time and really don't and haven't. So like that, it is strange that they would not have been invited, but then you think of, okay, maybe it was blocking them out essentially because they don't want that, state.
Yeah, I think the idea, I wouldn't call myself a historian on the creation of the Big 12. Obviously, I covered the league for a long time, but exactly, it makes sense that you'd have the 4 Texas schools: Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Texas, and Texas,
and Baylor.
And Baylor, yes, Ann Richards.
Thank you, Ann Richards, yes.
Yes, moving into that, but I could see just politically how it would be very tough in the formation of the Big 12 to include Arkansas and not include a TCU or a Houston or a Rice or an SMU.
Well, and also you may have had Oklahoma and Oklahoma State saying, we don't want them coming and taking our place.
Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, Fayetteville's an hour and a half from Tulsa? Like,
yeah.
You don't want them to be able to.
I flew out of there quite a bit when I was a kid.
Yeah, you don't want them to be able to roll in and grab some of your best players and just take them out of the state. So that it makes when you digest it like that, it makes more sense. But there was more to that with Frank Broyles, and I did know this because having done a lot on realignment, I do know that Texas was open to the idea of going to the SEC in that first round. When Arkansas went to the SEC, when South Carolina went, Florida State turned the SEC down to go to the ACC. But Texas was more open to it. Texas became very closed off to the idea of the SEC later, and then obviously came back around. But Frank Broyles talked to Bo about Texas as well, and this is where the alternate histories really spin out.
Texas privately, not openly, said if you would go and join, we will follow you. A&M and Texas was supposed to follow me. No, excuse me, not supposed. Had talked about it and were willing to do it and asked me when I told them I was going to go, and they said, well, we think we can come if you go first.
So that's the interesting thing. Now we go back to the story I wrote in 2014 on championship games. So the original rule for the championship game was written to say that you had to have 14 teams split into 2 divisions, because that was what the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference had. But then another conference co-sponsored the bill with them that only had 12 teams, and they said, can you write 12 instead of 14 on that proposed NCAA rule? If it had stayed 14, Roy Kramer, who was the commissioner of the SEC when they expanded, would have had to find 2 more teams. What if the 4 that came weren't just Arkansas and South Carolina? What if it was Arkansas, South Carolina, Texas, and Texas A&M? How different would college football be now?
I can't even wrap my head around it. I'm not sure. I think it would have definitely benefited Arkansas, because you would have had a little bit better chance of maintaining that Texas pipeline that was so important to them. I think it would have been, you would have lost some guys because you're not playing basically every road game in Texas, but keeping Texas and Texas A&M, I think, is key, because those are the teams that people want to go back and beat. But man, what the Big 8 does the Big 8 splinter, a Big 8 with, Kansas State and Kansas and Oklahoma State, and I guess, Colorado back then. If you adopt, Texas Tech and Baylor and TCU probably would have got in, and Houston, that's not a great league, Andy. And maybe Houston and TCU, and maybe they look a little different if they're in I guess it would have been a major conference. I mean, the Big 8 was rolling at this time because you still had Oklahoma and Nebraska running things.
Right.
And still were very successful. Colorado as well. Don't forget them. They've fallen off in the last few decades, but,
they were very good at the time.
They won the national championship in 1990. Let's not forget that. So at that time, it would have been really interesting. I don't know where they go, but
that one might, I mean, Would the Pac-10 have tried to merge with them?
No,
been a
because
pretty good league.
I don't think so, because I think that would have been. I think they would have been bogged down in the logistics and would not have had the carrot of the massive TV money to
Right,
chase them to do
because
that.
TV hasn't changed everything yet.
Yes,
At the time
it's
this
growing,
is
but I
happening,
still think people
yeah.
aren't seeing
This is
billion-dollar
early
deals.
90s. This is 6 years removed from the Supreme Court decision in NCAA versus Board of Regents.
Oklahoma,
So
yeah.
it's the money hasn't exploded yet. So people aren't thinking in those terms. They're really just thinking in terms of scheduling. This was when you had a bunch of big independents. You know, Penn State was an independent, Miami was an independent, and then you had the smaller independents, South Carolina, Louisville, that they played basketball in a conference but didn't play football in a conference. And so shout out to the old Metro Conference in hoops, which really when South Carolina left to go to the SEC and Florida State was an independent in football, played in the Metro Conference in basketball. When they went to the ACC, those Metro Conference schools then basically became Conference USA. So that would have been, I think the Big Eight probably would have been considered a self-sustaining entity and maybe picked up some other schools, because you're right.
Probably.
Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Colorado were plenty
spicy.
enough to float that league as a competitive entity.
And I don't know that TCU or Houston, or certainly not Rice, maybe SMU. If that's a tough time for SMU. Forget this is post-death penalty SMU, where they're in the dregs of, they shut down their program for a year and everybody left. So I don't know, Andy. It is fascinating. I just think, people wanted. I think the biggest misnomer is that, in 2010, people felt like these tectonic plates were shifting, and people like, this has never happened before. It's been happening forever. Like 2010 was the first time in, a decade or two that we had major moves. But even that, what Big East, ACC, the Miami stuff, that was what, 2003, 2004?
Yeah.
It hadn't even been that long, but you just had these big pieces moving around. But big pieces have been shifting for a long time, Andy, and they obviously did it again last summer. Realignment is not a singular event that happened in 2010. It's something that's been going on for a century.
Yes.
And looking back at all that and where we could have ended up, I really don't know. Andy, do we lose the "is Texas back" meme, or is it pointless if Texas is trying to make life in the SEC? These are the important questions we need to ask.
Well, I think this has just become, everybody thinks every round of realignment is the first one that ever happened. But this is why I believe when Larry Scott kept saying, there's more coming, more will come. And it's funny because I would be like, no, I don't know if that's true. I can't imagine like Texas going to the SEC or anything like that. And then they do. So I think we probably need to just expand what we can imagine, because things may get pretty crazy here in the next few years because of all the changes going on in terms of the governance of the sport, NIL, all that other stuff. You may see more of it.
Andy, I've said, I can't remember if we've talked about this. I've talked about this with a few people. If you could bet in the next 20 years if Oregon and USC will be members of the SEC, would you bet against that?
Oregon and USC in the SEC seems a little far-fetched, little extreme, David.
Well, but Andy, if there's only two leagues that are making so much more money, the Big Ten and the SEC,
then I see them
going
Oregon
to
the Big
USC.
Ten.
Maybe
Put them in the Big Ten. I think I only because like I can see USC wanting to align with the folks in the Big Ten. Oregon, I think, would do whatever. I think Oregon would be happy anyway as long as they're playing big time football. Washington's another one that I think would probably want to align with the Big Ten, and that's a big brand, big passionate fan base, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think if that was going to happen, that's who they would align with more likely than the SEC. But logistically, it's a pain in the butt any way you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But you've had Dabo say this now. You've had Mike Gundy say this in the past 2 weeks, where they say something's coming. There's a reckoning coming. And I think what we're seeing with NIL, we've said it, but more in terms of pie in the sky, like here's how things probably should work. It does feel like it's more realistic now. The idea of some sort of consolidation into like a top 40 or top 45 situation, whether that's one league, two leagues, three leagues, but that being a top tier, the top tier shrinking because other schools just can't compete. And you see like West Virginia, they're getting sick of losing their best players to the transfer portal. And are they just going to become a farm team? Because I don't know if I want to be that if I'm their fans. I mean, I understand their frustration.
Well, that's the thing. I've talked to some G5 coaches and even a couple FCS coaches have said this. The smaller schools are almost rooting for the break off for the reason that you're talking about. Maybe not the administrators and the finances, but the coaches are. The coaches are, like you said, they're tired of becoming a farm system. They already feel like they are because they know, hey, if one of our guys blows up, we're not going to keep him. He's going to want to go to wherever he wants to go at a bigger school and experience big time football. And you lose the the Garrett Wolfs of the world, or the Jordan Lynches of the world, who make a name for themselves and spend 4 or 5 years at smaller places. And Tuesday night on ESPN, you're watching these must see, action games, or guys in the Sun Belt that tear it up. And, you just don't see that as much. And I think that specific guy, the G5 legend that the internet loves and that is must-watch TV when the big schools aren't playing, I think that's already dead, Andy, and that does kind of make me sad.
I'm trying to think. Who was the last one of those? Was it Dree Archer?
It probably would have been Dree Archer. I think my personal favorite would have been the GOAT Chucky Keaton.
Chucky Keaton was involved in I was going. I can't even remember what the project was, but I was going through a bunch of old games, and Chucky Keaton came up so many times. Oh, it was overtime games. I was looking at overtime games, and there were so many Chucky Keaton overtime games that you're right. He was on, and it felt like he played for 100 years. So I think that helped too.
Yeah, but I guess you could throw maybe Khalil Mack in the mix there.
Yeah, and I remember when Khalil Mack played. I think they played at Tennessee, and the Tennessee people were like, that was the best player on the field.
Yeah.
So now I do think you'll still see the NFL and other college teams scouting those teams.
Yes,
because they're always on the hunt for people who can help them win. So, but I do think as a television product, and I got into this when I applied for the Big 12 commissioner job last week. TV windows, and I don't think I'm going to get it. Search firms haven't been calling, but one of the things I said is the Big 12 in its next TV deal needs to find a TV window where the Big 12 can be a star. It can be the star of that window. And I think Friday night is probably the more logical one. And I don't know if you need to make it where those games can't emanate from a stadium in Texas. Maybe you make that rule as an olive branch to Texas high school football, which you could do. I mean, you could play the Friday night games at UCF, at Cincinnati, at BYU, at Kansas State, and they'll do it. They're fine with it. But I do think they need a window where they're the start. So taking that to its next logical step, where we were talking about, consolidation and the top tier being smaller. Would that mean that then, I don't know, Kansas State and Baylor are your Tuesday night game at that point?
If the money's right, yeah. It's all going to come down to, what does ESPN want to pay? How many nights a week do you want to invest? I don't know what the max deal is offhand. It's not substantial, but it's about TV money. You look at those cold max stadiums in November, Andy, there's like 3,000 people in those stadiums. Yeah.
No,
but they're must-watch TV if you're a college football diehard.
Or if you're a gambler. That's the other piece of it. Mm-hmm. Sports gambling is going to be legalized in all 50 states at some point.
Still growing and only going to grow more.
Right. Once that happens, the demand for live sports every night of the year is going to be huge. So if you have college football product, you could you could just put it on Saturday and let it get buried by the other stuff, or you could put it where everybody's going to watch it. Because if there's a bunch of people gambling, they're going to watch the game that's on.
I do think, Andy, we're making progress, not so much in for gambling reasons, but I think we've seen it in the last few years from Fox's Big Noon Kickoff that people are realizing, hey, maybe don't play 9 of the best games of the day in prime time. Like,
amazing.
I don't know why it took so long, where like everyone's like, you know what? Maybe I don't really want to watch Northwestern and Indiana like fart around at noon, in a weed patch somewhere. Like
the
I don't want to see
saddest
that.
sound, David, is the audio, because you watch the games and you see the guys on the sidelines holding. It's called a parabolic mic. It's a big dish,
the
essentially.
satellite dish that they're
that captures the sound, the ambient sound. The stuff that they would get on the parabolic mic from your noon Northwestern at Illinois game was the saddest sounding stuff in the world. It's basically telling you to take a nap.
Yeah, it is. And now we get Michigan State at noon, and Michigan, Ohio State. Well, that's always kind of been at noon, but the big games early, it's nice. You can't have. I mean, the SEC has sort of claimed that 3:30 CBS spot. We'll see, what happens in
the
the
3:30
new,
ABC spot now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But again, it was infuriating, especially as for the general college football person. Not so much if you're locked in on one team because you probably don't care, but if you like the sport at large, it sucked when you get to 7:30 p.m. and you're trying to keep track of 6 games. Like, it's terrible. So spreading it out where there's maybe 2 big games in each window, that's manageable as a multi-screen college football consumer myself. So we've gotten there, and I think you're right, Andy. I think we will see it creep into other days of the week, and there will be some TV money there. There'll be some gambling eyes, all of those things. But listen, more nights where we have compelling college football that sounds like a great future.
It does. I'm in for that. And I know a lot of people don't want changes. I actually think the majority of fans would probably be okay with big game, because what it does is it also increases the level of competition. Like, it's just gonna be big game versus big name versus big name, as opposed to what some of the games are now.
And listen, the Wednesday night complaints from administrators and campus folks about the parking logistics, and it's a nightmare. It's gonna suck. I feel bad for you, but this is not about you. This is about TV money, and that's what college football has been for 15 years now, maybe longer. Where that's been the sole driving force
since the Supreme Court decision, even when they didn't really know it yet.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Let's move on to one of your other amazing stories from this past week. I laughed so hard at the horror stories from in-home visits from college coaches, where you got to go eat mom's cooking, even if mom is making a traditional Hungarian goose blood dish, which is what one Power 5 head coach had to put down. Or they might own, and I quote, the Shaquille O'Neal of pit bulls, and said dog is positioned right next to you for the entirety of the visit.
A metal eating pit bull. Andy,
yes, he eats metal.
Before we get into this, I feel like I need to clear some coaches' names for the record.
Okay, go for it.
There's been a lot of amateur detective work.
A lot of speculation, yes.
Trying to identify, for those who have read the story, the pooper, to be frank. The story was almost not included in the collection of tales. I fought for it, Andy. I won that battle.
I'm so glad you fought for it. And I listen, I love our editors, but trust us, we know what the people want.
I said, and I quote, the internet is going to try to figure out who this pooper is, and it's going to help the story. Andy, I've had multiple people on the internet, but also in person and via text, and it is not Brett Bielema. Please. Clear the good man's name. He did not do this. Has he done this before and did not tell me? I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Has it happened in his history? Maybe.
I don't know.
It's happened to all of us at one point.
I can tell you he is not the coach in this story. I can't tell you any more about who it is, but it is not Brett Bielema.
This is a Power 5 head coach, sitting Power 5 head coach, who, and I quote, blew up a family's bathroom thanks to mom's home cooking. Now, the better part is the part that I believe didn't make the story. You told me about this.
So actually,
There was a second incident.
So actually, there was so we had to make it the story slightly less graphic and shorten it. But I would also like to say one. So the bathroom blowing up was via some questionable chicken salad consumed prior to the visit. But after the visit, he said he was fine. But then on his way out, he had to stop and do it again at a Walgreens. So poor Walgreens.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was not great. But I'm glad we were able to include the story, even if we could not include all of the cogent details from said story.
Well, yeah, I listen. You're gonna guess who you think it is. It could be anybody. We've all been there. Now, the one I thought about. You had a Power 5 coordinator who said, and this has probably happened to every coach too. I had not even thought about this, but that the parents got in a fight, got in an argument in the middle of the in-home visit, and he's just trying to recruit the kid. And mom and dad are yelling at each other, and one of them just storms off and leaves. And it's like,
Yeah, he said it was very awkward. He's like, you're just kind of sitting there, just kind of looking around. He's like, there's nothing to really say because the dad like stormed out, and the mom had to kind of apologize. And then you know, it was an uncomfortable moment. Listen, it's like when you're a kid and you go over to the sleepover and the parents start fighting, and you're like, I'm just gonna get somewhere else. But when you're a coach, you can't leave the room. You got to kind of
right.
Sit
you
there.
Can't call your mom and be like, I got a stomach ache. I need to come home. He's got to stay, because there are rules about how many times you can do in-home visits, how many people can come. So you're there, you're using your visit, you can't leave. So
it's I just think recruiting is such a fascinating thing, and I think coaches, the one aspect of a coach that I think people forget is how much of a skill it is to be a social chameleon. I don't think I particularly have that skill, Andy. Maybe you feel like you do.
I think you do. I think you're very good at talking to people.
But going from rural East Texas to some the city of Dallas, or you're going to Oak Cliff, or you're going to wherever, and there's demographics and sociology and socioeconomics involved in all this, and you're going to go from maybe it's a giant house with some jungle cats where the parents are very well off, and maybe it's a small apartment in a rough neighborhood. All these things. And you have to get those people all to sort of like you and trust you and say, hey, you control a lot of the next 4 years of my son's life, and I'm okay with that. That is a tremendous ask. And to do that in a variety of places, with different races, different socioeconomic statuses, different all kinds of stuff, being able to do that, I think, is the most underrated part of what makes a recruiter great, because you have to recruit all kinds of different people and get all kinds of different people to trust you.
Including people whose parents have won Grammys. That's another good one. Now, I have many guesses about who this is, and I know you're not going to tell me because I just wrote about Nico Iamaleava.
I got you.
Iamaleava.
I
keep going Iam and then miss it. It's Iamaleava. I need it.
That is correct.
And yeah,
we'll get there. If we can get DJ Uyunglele, we can get Iamaleava. We got it.
Yes, Nico Iamaleava. Well, he goes to Long Beach Poly, and I was listing the former or all the alums of Long Beach Poly, which is an insane list, like Billie Jean King, Chase Utley, Tony Gwynn, Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed himself. But at one point at the same time, Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, Warren G, and Cameron Diaz were all students. And Nate Dogg and Warren G's kids have both played major college football. In fact, Warren G's son was on the Bills practice squad last year, I believe. But
sounds like a lot of regulating was happening.
Elijah Griffin, he played at USC. So I don't know who this is, but they didn't. The Grammy was a little tarnished and on the bottom shelf, and apparently the next visit, the Grammy had been shined up and moved to the top shelf.
I think the coach, he didn't specifically tell me this, but I think he may have strongly insinuated that he did not approve of that treatment of the Grammy. And the next time he came, the family made sure that.
Now you have to all watch the episode of The Simpsons where Homer joins a barbershop quartet, and they win a Grammy thanks to the song "Baby on Board," and then Homer, I can't remember why he tosses or he's trying to get rid of the Grammy or use it for something. And the pimple-faced high school kid who's always the menial employee at various things. He goes, "Oh, it's just a Grammy," and he throws it out.
Exactly. That was really, though, that was probably the most fun story to report out that I think I really have ever done, because it's just some incredible stories, and there were a few that didn't make the cut, none that I fought for. We tried to keep it as lean as possible, and keep only the best stories. But there were some great stories. There's a lot of food stories, some raccoon stew, some squirrel kebabs that didn't make the story.
Squirrel kebabs.
Yeah.
Wow, you're breaking up the skewers with your squirrel.
Well, reasons why I did not include that story is because the coach didn't actually eat it. They served it family style, and then they informed him these are squirrel kebabs, and he was kind of like, "I'm gonna have to pass."
See, that's
politely.
the difference between me and some of these guys. Like, you tell me there's squirrel kebabs on the table, I'm absolutely gonna try them.
I probably would try it. I think the most exotic meat I've ever eaten is kangaroo. I've never had the roadkill aspect of it. I've never had the possum, which one coach did actually get served possum.
Really?
Never had the possum, the raccoon, the squirrel. I admittedly, I'd be curious to try it. Those would be white meats. No, they would not be red meats.
I believe I've had squirrel. There's not a lot of meat on a squirrel, first of all.
Well, there you
so
go.
You might have to do it in kebab form. That might be the only, or make it into a stew.
Perhaps. I'm sure gator's not that exotic from down where you are, especially.
No, they have it. It's an appetizer at pretty much every restaurant. So
yeah, and then of course you have. Are we going to count squab as an exotic meat? The pigeon.
I don't know.
It's not. I've had it once. It's not very.
Any
good.
sort of poultry fowl is not that exotic.
I think you're probably right. So I if given the opportunity to try a roadkill meat that humans normally, I would have some questions about the acquisition of said meat. If it was actual roadkill, I might have some pause.
I remember in college I dated a girl who had a major in the ag school, and they had a wild game dinner, and you buy tickets to the wild game dinner, and they would serve venison, and they'd serve duck and wild boar. Mm-hmm. Well, there was some duck there, and it was delicious. And I asked the guy, like, "What kind of duck is this?" He's like, those ducks that hiss, the Muscovy ducks.
I don't think I know what that is.
They have like white heads, and they have red around their eyes, and they don't quack, they hiss. And
I think I just learned about a new animal.
There's a ton of them in Gainesville, and not necessarily in places like. There's a bunch by TJ Maxx, and there's a bunch at the time. There was a bunch that lived around an apartment complex called Town Park, and the guy goes, "Yeah, I just went out and got him from the apartment complex." I'm like, "What?"
See, I want to know if I'm being served this roadkill. Am I going to have to be picking buckshot out of my teeth while I'm eating it? Because if that's the case, then I'm not so sure.
I don't think he used a gun.
Well, now I have more questions.
I believe he told me he used a baseball bat.
Well, that's not great. Although I guess if he's dying quickly and people are
slaughtering animal is slaughtering animal, and yeah, it was one of those like, well, when in Rome,
yeah. So, we're here, bottoms up.
Yeah. I was 19 years old at the time, so I was just like, okay, so that's something y'all do, okay. So,
I'm sad we can't get 19-year-old Andy on the podcast. I feel like he'd be a tremendous podcast.
19-year-old Andy was such an idiot. I mean, as dumb as I am now, imagine me so much dumber without any life experience whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Not completely sheltered growing up, but pretty sheltered growing up. Like,
I have always said, Andy, my wife and I were talking about this the other day. I was like, if at any point you can look back on yourself 2 or 3 years earlier and not think that guy is an idiot, you're probably not growing. So I don't really feel I think about some of the things that I thought and did and said when I was in 8th grade, 12th grade, 22, 23, I'm 34 now. And I'm like, it's rough. It's not great. Just didn't know anything about anything. But I feel like that's a sign that, hey, if I felt like that guy, that 22-year-old David, he had it all together. Well, you're. I hope you didn't, because
when I meet these college players that are, they're getting straight A's in school, they're excelling on the football field, they're starting a foundation off the field. I'm like, how How do you do all this? There's no way I could have done half of this.
It's a good question.
Well, but I'll tell you what I'm really thankful for, because you talk about, 15-year-old David and 15-year-old Andy. Thank God Twitter didn't exist.
Dude. Listen, Andy, we are turning the page into parenthood in this household. So we have our baby girl is coming in a month and a half, I believe. And Andy, I don't even know what elementary school, middle school, junior high. I'm shuddering to think about high school. Like, the experience is just so different. Even now, I talked to a high school teacher, just talking about there's a friend of ours, just talking about the environment in a high school now. It's unrecognizable to the way that we grew up, and I feel like an old man.
I've got a middle schooler
right
and one that's finishing elementary school, about to go to middle school, and the world is a very different place. And I get questions every day. When can I become a YouTuber? Like, not now. Like, the internet is forever. Not now.
It's like that the Nate Bargatze bit where his wife, he was talking about we have a daughter. Are you familiar with Nate Bargatze, Andy?
No.
You should. First of all,
Okay.
He's hilarious. One of the funniest people in comedy right now. But he has a bit, I think it's on his latest special, where he was talking about my daughter, she just wants to be a YouTuber, which as a comedian makes me furious. But he was like, he's like, she has all these videos that are on my phone, and she's like, hey, like and subscribe. He's like, the only subscribers are me and her mom, because all these videos just exist on my phone. And I feel like this is the influencer YouTuber. I feel like is the new astronaut NBA player, which that feels like a concerning development in American society. This has gotten a real deep podcast now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because what are you actually aspiring to? Are you
fame is the issue?
Listen, if we really boil it down, because let's think about most of these people who are influencers. They're mostly good-looking people.
Mm-hmm.
Good-looking people have been getting a pass since there have been humans.
This is true.
Like, that hasn't changed. You've been able to kind of slide through on your looks for the most part since humans have existed. So there's that. Now, if you're good looking and also funny, those people have always been successful as well. So
it's a good combo.
So I don't know that much has changed other than the delivery method.
Yeah, you're maybe right about that. I just think we'll see. It's been interesting to see the evolution of some of the early YouTube stars who kind of figure out what they're doing and do something else and what that looks like.
What are Will Greer's brothers doing right now? That's what I want to know.
It's a good question. It's a good question. But I never really, YouTube, I kind of get it. Some of the other, like the major YouTube stars, when I was in like college or, young adulthood, I didn't really understand, which made me feel very, very old. Did your kids like the weird Fred kid with the super high pitched voice?
No, they don't. There's a British guy named Morgs that theyll watch, and
there's all these people that are so famous that I've never heard of before.
For a while,
that is a rough look.
They don't do this anymore, and I can't even remember the people's names. But basically, these are people who would play Minecraft on YouTube and show you how to do different things in Minecraft on YouTube. And it was like a husband and wife, and they had millions of subscribers.
Andy, when we were kids, we just go to the video game store and buy the guidebook or order it off of Nintendo Power
Game
Magazine.
Pro. I had a Game Pro subscription.
Yeah.
But these people, if you embed when you monetize a YouTube account that has millions of subscribers, you are making
a ton of
great money. So it's basically this guy. The guy's name was Preston. I can't remember his wife's name. They were all they did is yell into the camera about.
Some would argue that's what we do, Andy.
That is what we do, but we're not as good at it apparently as them, because. By the way, this is where I tell you, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Smash that subscribe button, y'all.
Smash. Also,
leave a comment.
Like and subscribe to the podcast itself. We do want you subscribing to this podcast. Please leave a 5-star review. Tell us you hate us after you leave a 5-star review.
Yeah, that's
fair enough.
I'm fine.
But yes,
that's a good arrangement.
But these people, Like, I don't get it, but my kids would watch it for hours.
Yeah. I think, it's sort of like the whole, your parents are out of touch that you feel like when you're growing up. And I don't know that I think we talk ourselves into, well, I'll understand more when
Nope.
I'm older. And I think there's no way to avoid this. I think just
No,
things
I
change
am
and-
not cool. I do not understand what the appeal of TikTok is. I do not understand. Like, okay, Instagram, I get it. Like, you are putting out cool photos, or a short video. But why does there have to be an Instagram story and Instagram Reels? Who cares? Why do you need 3 different places for that in the same app?
I'm not even on Instagram, Andy. My dog's on Instagram, but I am not.
Oh, well, that's the way to do it. I was told last week I need to increase my Instagram presence, but what am I I'm gonna take pictures of myself?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to look at pictures of me.
Andy Staples thirst traps coming up.
Exactly. So I could send the big nasty burger that I ate in Knoxville on Friday night. That's a beautiful thing. So
it is. Andy,
maybe
you were
I'll
living right in Knoxville this weekend. I have to say.
Moonshine Mountain cookies. That was those are unbelievable, by the way.
They're so good. Which ones did you get?
So I had the peanut butter
Okay.
and white chocolate one. I had the raspberry and white chocolate, and there was one more. I think it was lemon blueberry. And I originally wanted the quadruple chocolate, but they actually were out, and he said it was very close to closing time. He said those take 30 minutes to set up, so they can't just bake more. Which I really do appreciate the art of 30 minutes to set up, because these are I like a thick, chewy cookie, and these things are about an inch high at the highest point, and you don't cook them all the way in the oven. You pull them out and you let them set up for
they're
10,
unbelievable
15 minutes, and
they're probably my favorite cookie in town.
It is great. But I did not get a chance to go to Buttermilk Sky Pie, but that's another place in Knoxville I highly recommend, the I-40 pie, which is chocolate chips and coconut and a bunch of other stuff.
Andy, we are careening into football and grits food territory, but I need to tell you about this place.
Okay.
So my wife and I did a little kind of weekend anniversary trip to Atlanta a few weeks ago, and we stumbled upon this guy. I need to Google it right now. I can't remember what the name of it was, but he runs I'm going to call it a black market bake shop in the basement of a Subway.
Okay.
And we did not realize this because he had a kind of a normal looking website. But it's just like one guy in this bakery, and like it literally is a very like sort of kind of sketchy setup. But he basically makes these giant cookies. So we had one, I forget what it was included, but it was a cookie with a blondie baked inside of it.
What?
And he has all these things hooked up. I'm gonna try to find this guy while we're here doing this. But this guy is
amazing.
unbelievable. It's like it's his name. It's like, oh, it's Shane. Shane.
Not the Shane Company. That's a jewelry store.
Yes. I'm looking this up right now. Sugar Shane, Andy. Sugar Shane,
not Sugar Shane Mosley.
Sugar Shane's Cookie Shop. This is the name. He has a very nice website, but it is operated out of what is essentially the basement of a Subway, and it is unbelievable, Andy. It is one of the greatest.
I'm looking at these cookies. Oh my god! Wow!
And he includes microwave instructions to get them to the
late
perfect
night
amount of
Oreo.
melting.
I don't even know how this is even possible. This thing is massive.
So I believe my wife and I got a s'mores, and we got I forget what the other one was called because he rotates them quite a bit. But it did have a blondie inside of it. But man, Andy, it was unbelievable. One of the better desserts that I have ever tasted in my life, and just outstanding all around.
Well, we're definitely gonna have that. Next time I'm in Atlanta, Sugar Shane.
Shane's coming
your way.
Go down the back of the basement of the Subway.
Now, getting back to our discussion of YouTubers and YouTube stars, you did a story on some folks who are a little more conventional comedians, but have found their place on YouTube. the SEC shorts, folks. And for those who have not had the pleasure, I'm going to play you just a short piece of my favorite SEC shorts clip. This is the Auburn roller coaster.
Thank you for riding the Auburn Fan Experience. Doors are up on your left. Please follow signs to the exit. Enjoy the rest of your stay at SEC World.
What was that? 3-9? We were just 2 years removed from the national championship. Let's get out of here.
Wait. There's still no one else in that line.
So? You want to do that again?
No, I don't want to go through that again. But that first ride through was incredible. And maybe, just maybe, it can be like that again.
That was pretty incredible. A few facility upgrades and coaching change.
Yeah.
So the joke is that they've gotten on the roller coaster at SEC World, the Auburn Fan Experience. The ride requires you to press a button, and the first time they press it, they get 2010 and the greatest ride of their life. And what you came in on was them coming off 2012 because they decided to ride it a second time. But if that does not describe the Auburn Fan Experience, I don't know what does.
Pretty much. I think we have some episodes in the last 5 months that would be another impressive ride in the Auburn Fan Experience. Quite an off season they've had, Andy. But yeah, the SC Shorts guys, Josh Snead, Robert Clay are sort of the main two figures. They have some actors that they've hired, but their story is really interesting, Andy, and we wrote about it. They were working jobs they hated, editing medical lectures with really gross.
God, that sounds
awful. They just sat in a dark thing and edited medical lectures with gross pictures and just people.
Oh, they're like working on cadavers while they're talking and stuff.
No, I think it's just like 100 Ben Steins talking within like gross pictures on
except
top
with
of it.
Pimples or cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
So they're doing that all day and just hated that job. And then, long story short, right after the SEC Network launched, they were like, "How do we get on this?" And Paul Feinbaum puts out a call for fan rants, and I think he was thinking, they would maybe get like the stereotypical Feinbaum caller, but
right, just turn their phone on,
and they did get a lot of that.
Yeah,
but they were like, well, let's just make like a sketch because they've done a couple things in the past. They did a Gene Chizik video, they did a Kick Six video because they're both, Robert he went to film school and he's pretty classically trained, and Josh went to Montevallo and has some acting background and some other things, the star of that particular video. And they're like, let's just make a video and see what happens. And the Feinbaum loved it. Their producers, Mark Kubiak and John Hayes, who now works with us, were big fans. And they ended up doing an episode, like a sketch a week for free for Feinbaum for that year. And then they sort of kept on doing it. And now they have their own thing. And they got a live show in Athens this weekend. Like, it's just, they've kind of been on this ride of their own sort of Auburn Fan Experience. And they've gone from working a job they hated to being sort of small business owners and minor Southern celebrities, Andy. And I think the one thing, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, one of my main considerations was I don't want to wake up every day and hate the idea of going to work. I want to look forward to going to work. And I think they had some of that in them as well. And I think it's cool to see them be able to live that out and just not sort of hate their lives, which we talked to them about in the story that for a lot of that period early on, 10 something years ago, they kind of did. And so it's cool to see them where they are now and have this sort of life that they built themselves. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is amazing. And they get the people that they're lampooning. And it's interesting because it's one of those, this is a tough line to straddle when you're trying to make people laugh, where yes, people can laugh at these people. Like you're laughing at the Auburn fan, but you know who finds that even funnier? The Auburn fans themselves.
Yeah, they did say that the Auburn fans like the roller coaster video. They did say Auburn fans can be a little bit of their little touchy, but they said that the fans that they thought are the most willing to make fun of themselves, Andy, Tennessee fans.
Really?
Yeah.
Would not have expected that. But
yeah.
But they come at it from a we're also one of you kind of thing. And I feel like
because they are.
more...
They live in Birmingham right now, and Robert, who is usually behind the camera, but he's appeared in some of the videos. He's a full-on dyed-in-the-wool Auburn fan. Josh kind of bounced around when he was a kid and tried to like both Auburn and Alabama, and then was told that was, I know. I go into this in the story, was told that is not acceptable. So his basketball coach at the time made him choose, and Alabama won the national championship that year. So he's now an Alabama fan, and this is a point of contention because Robert makes fun of him for being a stereotypical Alabama fan who does not have an Alabama degree, and is literally a fan because of some T-shirts that he bought.
T-shirt fan, yeah, that's right. So the work they did on Georgia, and because that 1980 joke was so old and so tired, but the work they did as Georgia went to the national title, just sort of picking at the anxiety of Georgia fans, was tremendous. So I have one more clip of theirs to play, and I hope they don't mind. I love this stuff so much, and please, by all means, go to the SEC Shorts YouTube channel and watch all the. You will whether you're an SEC fan or you hate SEC fans and want to laugh at them, you will enjoy this. So this is between the SEC championship game and the Orange Bowl. So Georgia has just lost to Alabama, is about to play Michigan. There's a recurring character in the Georgia universe of SEC Shorts. Her name is Hope, and Hope and the Georgia fan base are in therapy, and it's tremendous.
He's going to Miami for the semifinals, and he said I can't go with him.
No. I technically said, I'll never take you anywhere with me ever again for as long as my lungs draw breath, you soul-draining succubus.
Okay, Georgia, thank you for clarifying that. I'd like to try an exercise with both of you. Could you each share one thing that you appreciate about the other? Hope, why don't you go first?
Okay, well, I appreciate that he has the number 3 ranked recruiting class in the nation. That's a pretty big deal.
Great. Georgia?
I appreciate the fact that she wants to be by my side in Miami for the Michigan game, so that she can put my heart in a meat grinder after she somehow makes us blow it despite being 7.5-point favorites on national television for the entire world to see.
Okay, Alabama threw 365 passing yards in the first half, so maybe you should try, guarding all conference receivers when they run deep post routes.
Okay, Hope, remember, we want to avoid going to problem solving when the other person is sharing their feelings.
This is so stupid. Do you know how many teams would love to have me? I mean, I have 3 missed calls from Florida alone since we've been in this session.
See, that's the best. They can get the shot in at Florida while just skewering Georgia. It's tremendous.
Yes, and I'm sure they reunited there at the end of the season. With Georgia
Hope moves
Capital
on.
West.
There's one of the more recent episodes. Hope moves on because Georgia doesn't need her anymore.
Yep, there you go. But yeah, they have a great story, Andy. I was glad to tell it. Robert told me that his mom is going to print out the computer screen.
Yes,
version of the Athletic article and frame it for him. So we're looking forward to it.
That has been one of the more difficult things for me since moving to the Athletic is when mom and dad want a copy. Now I've gotten good at making really nice looking PDFs for mom and dad, but that's, before the old job, it was easier if there's a magazine, you can just send it to them. But yeah, you got to figure out how to make them the nice. I need a laminating machine so I can make laminated copies of the stories and then mail them out.
Put it on your Christmas list, Andy. There you go.
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll put it in my next negotiation. Like, laminate, what's this for?
Yeah. Well, we're
winning hearts and minds one at a time. That's why we got the laminating machine.
Exactly.
So, well, listen, David, you've been on fire, and you've been just like Detlef and Sean Kemp. One of you is on fire, one of you is goaltending, and you're unstoppable. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this stuff, and thank you for writing all these stories, because this is the off season, man. We need stuff to make us laugh, to make us think about this stuff. And this is absolutely great that we're getting this now in the dead of April. Just imagine how good it's going to be once the season starts.
I'm looking forward to it. I think, Andy, after 2020, I will never feel the desert of the offseason ever again.
No.
Where the offseason goes down so much smoother when you know that it's going to end.
Yes.
And considering that we have all lived through what we thought might be an endless offseason, April, man, it feels like the college football season is right around the corner because I know it's there. And I can never take that for granted again the rest of my life.
And
So
I won't.
looking
I remember when Nicole Auerbach and I were doing the story on in-home workouts that the strength coaches were sending to the players, and like I'm pushing my truck and Nicole's like curling wine bottles. Like this is a fun story, but is this the end? Is this the last fun story? Will there never be a fun story again? So yes, I'm with you. I'm so happy that this feels. Last year felt pretty normal, but this feels even more normal. And I am so excited about this coming season. We got spring games. We got a lot more to talk about. We got the draft coming up too. We got Stars Matter on Thursday. On Friday, the athletics draft expert Dane Brugler will join us. We're going to talk about all the things that have changed, the guys that are the risers. Dane wrote you a book. It's called The Beast.
It's unbelievable. Like
he's the best.
If you haven't accessed it before, like it's just ridiculous. The draftniks out there, this is made for you. Yes. Dane is one of you.
Yes. So we're gonna talk to Dane on Friday. We won't go through the whole Beast because that would be a 16-hour show, but we will talk about some of the guys that have made the move here in the last few weeks that are shooting up the draft boards. And we just got a lot more going. I got a very special guest next week, Hendon Hooker, Tennessee quarterback. We talked to him in Knoxville and got a story coming out on him. You're going to get to hear from him. One of the great stories in college football last year. So a lot coming up on the Andy Staples Show. David Ubben, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Andy.